that freedom is very subjective word, and we have to use it very, very carefully, even if in the modern context.
But
You know,
what we see throughout history is that empires can do a lot of good in the world, but they can also crush people as well. No state is perfect, no government is perfect, but the biblical principle we see is that leaders should be connected to the people that they're leading.
I'm excited about some of the things that American policy, foreign policy has done lately. Like they are finding partners in different places, right? So, finding partners in the Arabian Peninsula, looking for partners in like Somaliland, right? Like
Islam will continue to be triumphant until there have been 12 Khulafa, all of them from Al-Quraysh.
The God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed. Nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever.
This is my brother, my executor, and my successor among you, so listen to him and obey.
My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting.
Whoso obeys me obeys God. Whoever disobeys me disobeys God. Whoever disobeys my commander disobeys me.
The Lord said to me, You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession.
Two systems of government, two visions for life on earth. Whichever is true changes everything. This is Christ and Khulafa.
Welcome back to Christ and Caliphate. On this podcast, we talk about current events in the Middle East and the Muslim world, and we talk about things from a Christian worldview perspective and get into the roots of the ideas that are shaping the world today. And today, we are going to be talking about Somaliland. We're going to be talking about the biblical view of nations, and we're going to be diving a little bit into the sort of Islamic view of nation states as well. So, how much have you been following things with Somaliland?
I mean, I hadn't until we started talking about doing this podcast. um, I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself, until we start like talking about what happened, what the current events are. But I read up on it a little last night.
nice.
So, the reason this is the big deal right now, these are the kind of things that people talk about all the time. There's all sorts of separatist nations that want to, start up and start new countries. But right now, the US government is actively discussing this. So here is a letter from Ted Cruz to Donald Trump on this issue. It says, Dear President Trump, I write to urge your administration to formally recognize the Republic of Somaliland as an independent state with sovereignty within its 1960 borders. Somaliland first gained independence and international recognition in 1960 before voluntarily uniting with Somalia later that year. Since moving to reclaim its independence in 1991, it has functioned as a stable, self-governing democratic nation. It has held several peaceful elections since 2003, marked by strong voter turnout and peaceful transitions of power. Somaliland has emerged as a critical security and diplomatic partner for the United States, helping America advance our national security interests in the Horn of Africa and beyond. It is strategically located along the Gulf of Aden, putting it near one of the world's busiest maritime corridors. It possesses capable armed forces and contributes to regional counterterrorism and piracy operations. It has enabled the opening of a Taiwanese representative office in the capital of Hargeisa, sought to strengthen ties with Israel and voice support for the Abraham Accords. It has proposed hosting a U.S. military presence near the Red Sea along the Gulf of Aden, and is open to critical minerals agreements that would support our supply chain resilience. The U.S.-Somaliland partnership is robust and it's deepening. Somaliland faces mounting pressure from adversaries due in no small part to its role as a partner for the United States and our allies. The Chinese Communist Party is using economic and diplomatic coercion to punish Somaliland for its support for Taiwan, as well as to undermine that support. The government of Somalia has played an unfortunate role in these efforts. In April 2025, the CCP arranged for Somalia to bar Taiwanese passport holders from transiting into Somaliland, and Chinese support to Somalia is benefiting anti-Somaliland groups working to erode its sovereignty. Despite these threats, Somaliland remains committed to forging closer ties with the US and is actively engaged in enhancing military cooperation, counterterrorism efforts, and economy and trade partnerships. To do so, the great effect and the greatest benefit to American national security interests. It requires the status of a state. I urge you to grant it that recognition. As always, I stand ready to provide you with whatever resources and support you require in helping to secure this goal.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Very interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, just so everybody knows, like, Ted Cruz is a nobody. You know, he ran for president a couple times. Like, you know, even when the Republicans are out of power, he still has a lot of influence. So, yeah, that's not a nobody thing.
Right. This is one of the biggest voices in the Republican Party.
This is a big voice.
Going back to the establishment of Somaliland, if people think that Somaliland is a new idea, it's not, as the letter itself says, and a little bit of history that it was a country back in 1961, and then they volunteered with mainland Somalia, and then regretted it within a week or two.
Yeah.
So I think that decision, but I do not know why international community or UN did not accept it. It's a sovereign state to this day, and I think one important aspect that we need to look at here is countries aligned with countries based on their interests. When we say America's interests are there, of course, America will do something. If its interests are not there, America is not going to bother. That's my simple line equation. So here, I think United States need that particular land for their, I would say, Red Sea operations or Gulf of Eden operations, or keeping an eye on the pirates out there, or like United States wants presence there. So I think the motive behind it is that, and with the caveat, I think in near future we gonna see Somaliland as one of the independent states on the map of the world.
Yeah, and the letter says that, right? It's not like he's trying to hide the fact. It's like, why should we do this? Number one, it's good for us.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, hey, this is good for them too. And from a foreign policy perspective, I think, being honest about those things is good.
Yeah, but I don't want one thing, and it has happened in the past, and it brought catastrophic effects when we want to implement, I would say, not real change, an artificial change, uprising in the people against one particular nation that give rise, for example, you put in a lot of resources in, for example, Libya. What happened in Libya, where Libya is standing today? If you ask Libyan people, they will say, okay, we were living under dictator. Of course, we don't want Gaddafi. We didn't like Gaddafi. But the I'm saying, Libya back then was better economically, or the standard of life was better than what it is right now, right? So yes, we or United States should not rush this decision that no, we want to do it, but we will not do it organically, but let it like fast track it, and that will have consequences, I guess.
Sure. I think the difference here is that this is happening organically already, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Somaliland is seeking its own independence and partners, and it's a natural nation already. And so I think that's very different than Libya, which is like, this basically requires no regime change. It's simply recognizing the sovereignty of Hargeisa over a certain amount of territory, rather than arbitrarily recognizing Mogadishu as a sovereign of all the territory, right? Because functionally, the government in Mogadishu has no presence in Somaliland already.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a case of whether it's recognized or not.
Right.
Yeah, I think one thing that I would just observe from 30,000 feet, the high view, is that I'm actually I'm excited about some of the things that foreign policy has done lately. Like, they are finding partners in different places, right? So, finding partners in the Arabian Peninsula, looking for partners in like Somaliland, right? Like not necessarily taking, this kind of post-Cold War approach to things that lead to isolationism, So I'm excited about that. Listen, China is a problem. They're a problem for the whole world, right? Because China's in it for China. And China's going to try and expand, and they're going to put their diplomatic and economic pressure on anyone who doesn't see things their way. Um, I do think that if this has to go before the UN, we need to acknowledge that the UN is not like a democracy, right? Like you're allowed to say whatever you want, but then there are 3 or 4 countries that have complete veto power and can just shoot everything down. So um, I don't think that, I don't think that it'll come to that. I think that what this letter in particular is asking for is the United States recognize them as a partner. And I don't see a problem with that. And I think that when you start recognizing like nation states as whether or not they're going to be your ally or not, first of all, you have to do what he just did, right? You have to list all of the positives. You have to also list all of the negatives. And if the negatives outweigh the positives, you should not be an ally with that person. If it creates a trade deficit with you, if there's no strategic element to it, if it doesn't benefit your country in anything, if you're just going to sit there and pour billions of dollars into supporting a government that is, not functional, then you shouldn't do those things, right? But I think what I'm seeing right now is positive. Like, listen, terrorists are awful. Piracy in the Red Sea is bad. Like it's really bad. They made a movie about it. Like, look at me, I'm the captain now, right? Like, this is a big problem for the entire world. And, China's not going to step in and fix it. China's not going to sit there and try and enforce like free trade in that area. They're going to do what benefits them. And, by proxy, like the Russians will too. So what do you have to do, right? At this point, you're seeing the world just kind of choosing sides, you know? And I think that in the middle of that, like, let's pick a partner that has had elections. Let's pick a partner that has, at least since 2003, a track record of, headed towards progress. I don't know what their human rights situation is, but it makes it sound pretty good, and I think it's definitely better than Somalia. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, and I think one other aspect that is, I think, worth mentioning is that Somalia is going through turmoil for a very, very long time. And in that case, there is a hope. The hope is like, if I don't know who will be the ruler and what type of governance they're going to apply, whether it's going to be democratic or another dictator ruling Somaliland. If that is the case, I have a bias against dictatorship, and I think we all do, right? We are against dictatorship. So if another dictator is
What was that
taking,
one guy. No, I'm kidding.
you're talking about the movie.
I'm talking about that episode of Family Guy where
Okay.
where Peter made his own country called.
I thought you were talking about the dictator movie.
Oh yeah, no, not dictator.
Aladdin.
Aladdin. Anyways, yes, James. So going back to that, I think if it's Somaliland is ruled by another dictator, maybe for 5, 6, 7, or God knows for how long, he will serve U.S. interests. But then if he flips the side, then what's next?
Yeah, I mean, although it really doesn't look like it's happening so far, because their argument of why they should be a country is that they've had peaceful transitions of power and have been doing so for like decades at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So the culture of the country doesn't have a dictatorship currently. And all they're asking is the current government of the Somaliland province of Somalia becomes the government of Somaliland, which, if I'm looking at how a revolution should be conducted, this is like exactly what I'd want to see. So I think we've talked about before, biblically, I don't believe in mass amounts of people taking arms against their government and sort of overthrowing them, hanging the dictator, etc., like the French Revolution. What I believe in is the doctrine of the lesser magistrates, meaning that people lower than the supreme ruler, but who are nevertheless in the government, should take measures to protect their citizens from the central government and actually build something that serves people, and then eventually can properly secede from the central government and build their own thing. And that is exactly what is happening in Somalia. From a sort of biblical case, from everything that appears on the surface, they've done everything the way they should be doing things as far as building is like legitimately
Mm-hmm.
making secession. And we talk about why the UN hasn't recognized this so far. This is just my theory about this, but there are lots and lots and lots of people groups that want to secede and make their own nation states.
Mm.
And anytime the country succeeds in doing that, suddenly there's a lot of people in the woodworks who are like, "Oh, why can't we be a country? Why can't we be a country? Why
Yeah.
can't we be?"
I'm
Which
looking at you, Idaho, Oregon, Northern California, Eastern Washington.
so it basically, every time it happens, it opens up the question, or what? Wait, why are we part of this country again? And national governments hate those kinds of things, and they're generally trying to avoid that happening, which is sometimes a good thing, sometimes a bad thing.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful oversight over this particular thing that UN see those things and kind of like look at this domino effect. It becomes a domino effect. For example, back in 1947, you see how many nations were born because once uh, Great Britain pulled out, a lot of independent nations came, and then upon it, other nations got the idea. Same happened.
Post World War One too.
Yeah, post World War One, and then Soviet decline. After Soviet decline, how many other countries kind of like follow that route? So, given that, I think it's a very valid point. But I think at the end of the day, we should be hopeful that the transition is smooth, and there is no external artificial force applied.
Mm-hmm.
I think aiding is different. You are there to help them to a certain degree is okay. But to just go on and artificially implement that, this is what I am against. And it has not worked in the past, and it failed again and again. So it is not that something that should be repeated. So that's
What do you mean it went so well in Iraq and
I
Afghanistan?
was going to say that, right? Like, I think we're moving away from. I mean, hopefully, we're moving away from um, nation building, right? Like, let's try and install democracy as a new operating system or something like that. It doesn't seem to have like the kind of effect that we wanted to have. But
right.
truth be told, in this particular situation, it looks like you don't have to do that. And I think it's a no-brainer in those situations too, right? Like you share like some of our values,
Mm-hmm.
so let's be friends, right? Like that seems like common sense to me, particularly in an area that's been destabilized for so long. I
Yeah.
mean, so long, right? Like, listen, Ethiopia has never been conquered, right? But Ethiopia has also had like a really nasty internal conflict between North and South Ethiopia. So that's a stable country, but it's like splitting in half, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're watching this happen before your eyes, and you have to kind of sit back and wait and see how things play out, like in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
So, is it wrong after things have played out to want to be like, well, who's the side that is closest to us, right? Like, we need allies. We need strategic partners in the area, in Africa, in the Gulf states, right? In the Middle East. We need them, and we don't have them. And it seems like we need them now in like Eastern Europe too. So
Yeah.
we need them in different places. And if we don't have them, and I'm talking from an American perspective, if people like are like, well, that's an American thing. Sure, why not? I live in America. I want it to do well. My kids are here.
Yeah, and I think as Christians living in America, we can both the kind of policies we should be advocating for are win-win policies,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
We shouldn't be wanting to expand American interests at the expense of the rest of the world, but in there's a way that America can win and other people can win too.
Yeah.
Those are best case scenarios, and this could be one of those.
Agreed.
So now let's shift gears and talk about nation states in general. So a big part of the last 100 years of history has been since the Sykes-Picot Agreement, where sort of the idea of nation states has kind of been imposed on the Muslim world, really without most people's choice in the matter. And I'm curious what you guys perceive is how most Muslims view nation states. So they see them as a good thing, as a bad thing. You're from Pakistan, you're from Turkey, probably two of the biggest Muslim countries with a sort of strong national identity.
Yeah.
Maybe more so than a lot of the Middle Eastern countries. So what do you guys think about this?
I mean, everybody cares when it comes to soccer, right? Just in Saudi Arabia, and they won their soccer competition. You know, I can't remember what it was. 'Cause I'm not a huge soccer guy, but I know that's blasphemy for a Turk, but it's true. And you know, everybody cares about national identity. I think it's important, right? Like, I think to say that is say, you know, people take pride in their country, you know, when it does well. So, you know, uh, I don't see people in Turkey or Saudi or Pakistan or some of these other Muslim countries going, I don't want to be a Turk, you know. I don't want to be I want to be known as as like I'm from India, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, Turks aren't going like, I want to be Lebanese, you know, or I want to be part of Russia. So, and the Saudis certainly aren't doing that.
Yeah, I think one aspect we have to see it with more dissected view is that Islam is believes in one state for all the Muslims, unified under one flag, right? And the identity stays. For example, Turks are always Turks, Indians are always Indian, Lebanese are always Lebanese. As under the umbrella of Khilafah, they can exist. That was the idea, you know, from the start. And the last, I would say, the last pinnacle or the last state in that regards was the Ottoman Empire.
Right.
Right? They wanted to incorporate, and but the problem, what happened back then, is the idea of nation state rose so fast from the opposite side, which I mean by European side or Western side, and it has its own benefits, right? It had some great things within it. So it was easy to adopt, I think. And then, of course, there was certain push behind it too, right? Not to just say that, oh, it was just attractive. No, there was also, because West was pushing their own agenda or kind of like wanted people to follow that system. And then on the other side, there's communistic ideas. So it was at that time, it was battle of the ideas. But why Islamic system failed is, or didn't work out the way it is, right? The idea lies in this fact that it is non-practical in many aspects. You are trying to belt together ethnically diverse people under one religion, right? So you're saying stay common, stay put under one religion. That is your whole identity, and don't deviate from it. I think it becomes more than impossible to live with that type of notion, given that Arabs were the original givers of the book. For example, Quran is in Arabic, right? The whole culture, Islamic original culture, is Arabic, and when they saw it with the Turks, there was a kind of like, oh no, we are the inheritors of this Islam, and we should be in lead rather than non-Arabs leading that, right?
Well, there's a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari where Muhammad says the Khalifa will remain among the Quraysh, even if there's only two persons left on earth.
Yes, there is. I think you're quoting Sahih Bukhari or
Yes,
Sahih Muslim,
I am,
right? So that is there. So that gives rise to these type of notions. Then why not stay independent or make our own countries and make an alliance later on? The idea of alliance came later, which is in 1960s and 1970s when the Islamic OIC was established, Organization of Islamic Countries.
Arab League, all that
Yes.
stuff. Yeah.
So all that time, but going back to the idea of nations, separate nations, from a traditional Islamic point of view, it does not exist. It is the act of revolution, I would say, or it is the act of how human societies progressed with time, and then whatever the system was best was implemented, and the best system was to have separate nations and work your way out.
Well, I think also when you talk in terms of the Ottoman Empire, I mean, it was there for a long time, and it had run its course. Like, you know, it had become technologically outdated quite quickly at the end, right? Like, they were they were they were insulated. Um, you know, they weren't forward thinking enough to keep what they had,
Mhm.
and on top of that, it became intensely unpopular within, like, in Turkey, right? Like, people did not want it anymore.
Yep.
So, I think that, like, when you start talking about, what does a modern day caliphate look like? If they were to, if they, whoever that they are, were to impose another, like, modern day caliphate, um, what does it look like? But I think that the thing is, since, for better or for worse, right? Since World War One, World War Two, since the '60s, since the '70s, and everything else like that, people have tasted freedom. Like, they've tasted, like, the ability to migrate. For instance, you can leave your country now. Like, if you're a Turk, you can go to Germany and open a donor stand and have, like, a very good life. You know what I mean? Like, you can go to these different places. You can come to America like we did, and you can have a much better life than you did in your country. So I think once people have tasted that kind of freedom and mobility within that, um, you have to be either, like, super dedicated to this idea of living under a caliphate and losing all of that freedom and mobility, which I think you would, right? Because the only way it would work is if the entire world is a caliphate, right? Like, if it's all being ruled by the same person with the same rules and same values,
Yeah.
and I just don't see that happening.
On my way coming here, I was thinking about this, that how different Muslim countries have different versions of Islam. I'm not saying the core belief, and that's true about Christians too. It's not just about.
Islam is observed differently everywhere where it's observed.
Yes.
Right.
So, with all that, how you can unify them. And also, not just saying it started from Ottoman Empire. Right after Khilafah, we read history together. How the Islamic history is full of turmoil, attacks upon each other, Umayyad versus Abbasis, and Abbasis versus someone else, and then going to the Spain, and then Spaniards, and so on and so forth. And then there is internal turmoil, brothers fighting against brothers, and so the idea of this itself is I think very impractical from the standpoint of ruling a mass with one entity which is culturally diverse and have so much of differences the way they think or the way they act, but you're unified under one particular thing uh, that is kalima. Kalima means Islam, right? So I think it it is there again. The emphasis is that it is according to Quran, it is according to Sunnah, but if you apply this now, ijma al ummah is agreed upon that the nation states can exist as within the bound of Islam. It is not something that is contradictory to Islam, that is not allowed by Islam. It's not something that is haram in Islam.
Mm-hmm.
You can have nations, just have the laws of Islam in your country, and that's what most of the Muslim countries are trying to do, particularly Pakistan, but they want to implement the Islamic system through democracy, which I don't know how that's going to work. It's not working because a lot of things are very contradictory to capitalistic idea. I'm not vouching here for capitalistic ideas, but the proven and tested methods are better than newer ones. Of course, you can try newer ones, which you have tried in the past and didn't work that great. So I don't know.
I mean, I think if you look at Turkey, you know, they tried to do that, right? Like they're trying to do that now, you know, particularly. Maybe they didn't try to do it at the onset of the republic, but if you look at it, I wouldn't say it's working, right? I wouldn't say that the trying to crossbreed, uh, you know, an Islamic system with a democratic system is working, because look at the economy now, right? Like again, they can't adapt. You know, you're too stuck on certain elements of Islam, and you're trying to marry them with capitalism, and they require like a sort of top down control. You know, whereas capitalism has, I mean, people would argue with me on this, the opposite effect, right? Like it frees up the individual instead of, you know, enabling um, like a small circle of rulers. But if you see what happened in Turkey, like who had the final say on the economic policy, right? It was Erdogan. Like, you know, who brought in all of these he brought in all these advisors and essentially didn't listen to them and did what he wanted because of how he viewed himself, right? Like, I'm the guy, I call the shots, right? Like, I want to be the sultan. I want to do this and I want to do that. And if I do it, it's the right thing because God is on my side, right? Like, God is on my side and God is for the people. But bro, it's the wrong call, right? Like, inflation is crazy. Like, nobody can eat, you know? And I think that those are like some of the fundamental problems with that. I mean, I think what's hard to grasp, for Americans in particular, is this idea that, listen, your faith and the state are so closely connected in Islam. They are, you know, they are historically and doctrinally supposed to be one. And, you know, in the West, it's not like that.
So I want to shift gears a little bit here and move into some of the biblical foundational ideas behind like nation states and why biblically I would argue that Christians should be pro nation state.
Okay.
Because what you have, if you look at the book of Daniel, the Messiah's kingdom is here to break into pieces all the kingdoms of the world, but bless all the nations of the world. And this is really important. So going back to what we're talking about as far as the caliphate, when we're talking about sort of top-down control, that's generally how the caliphate operated, especially maybe not under Uthman. Uthman is much more sort of libertarian as far as how he operated. But if you look at Omar, the whole premise of Omar's rule is he's kind of controlling every aspect of everyone's lives, at least for his government officials, right? He's keeping everyone on a short leash. And he's a very effective ruler in his own way, but it's certainly not creating a free society. And so now you can certainly have a benevolent dictator. And even with the system of the caliphate, you had the Shura Council for the first couple of leaders. So people are elected, I don't want to say democratically, but there's at least some sort of representation in there. The people are represented by their tribal chiefs. But how free people are depends on the benevolence of the leader. And so there are plenty of benevolent dictators. I'm not trying to make any commentary about which caliphs were benevolent and which ones were malevolent. Muslims believe in both kinds, and we might see who is who differently, and that's fine. But nevertheless, it is a centralized system. And typically, in centralized systems, the way it works is that top people are chosen because of their loyalty to the ruler rather than their competence.
Yeah, and also I would like to mention that freedom is very subjective word, and we have to use it very, very carefully, even if in the modern context. You know, America is the land of free, but at the same time, right now, I just heard in the news that there are some new laws or some new policies that have been introduced that anyone who is anti-American, then anti-American is very subjective. Is saying something to Trump would be considered anti-American? Who will decide what is anti-American? So it is in the same context. What is freedom? If Omar is ruling and the subjects are not feeling free, what it means for them to be free, right? So that is my point here, which I think is very important to address.
I think that freedom is being able to vote that stuff out. I think that people have policies, administrations come in, they have policies, and the idea is that they have to go back and reprove that to the people every couple of years, and that you can, it's becoming harder and harder to kind of vote out an entrenched system, but it's still possible. So I think that that's at least in the idea of what like that democracy looks like. That you would have like, all right, I don't like what just passed, right? Like I don't agree that there should be a litmus test for freedom of speech or something like that, so we can organize and we can vote.
But I would say the key of America would be the decentralization of power, which
Right.
is good. And while I would say almost every society, including America, is always inherently trending away from decentralization to centralization of power. It's just this, human need people have to want some sort of centralized leadership that's going to fix all their problems. It's very dangerous.
Oh my gosh, everyone's looking for a messiah,
Yes, everybody's
right?
exactly.
And who and how can we vote for him?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, no, it's
People have a void in their soul for a king who's going to be in charge of their whole life.
seriously.
And there's only one king that can do that, which is Jesus, who
Right.
is ruling from heaven,
Mhm.
will instruct you what to do in a way that's unique from everyone else and isn't going to treat you like a giant herd of, animals that all need the same thing.
Right.
Governments just don't have the power to have that kind of individuality because even though they'd like to be all-seeing, it's always a bluff. They cannot be focused on the good of every single individual. Therefore, individuals need to have self-government. We need to have decentralization. We need people that can actually see the needs of the people around them. Right? The biblical principle is having shepherds, people who are intimately connected to the people that they are supposed to lead, care for, and represent. And that's a really important principle. And if you don't have that, it tends to make your militaries useless. Because in a lot of societies, there's this kind of innate model that's either the Alexander the Great or the Muhammad model, which is the warrior philosopher king, which is the person that should be leading us is the best warrior, the clearest thinker, and the sort of best governor. And they're looking for all of that in one person.
Yeah, I mean, like we can exclude Muhammad from it because of the fact that there is a lot of I would say Muslims consider him as a prophet more than anything. It's a divine intervention sort of person. Even look at like Omar, for example.
Yeah.
Right? Or is not any prominent Islamic leader, right? Even modern day, why we are going so bad.
Yeah.
The problem is people are looking at that leader as a warrior at the same time, as a philosopher at the same time, a clear thinker at the same time, and all the good things in the world in one person. And that's, I think, the reason of the failures of those kind of states is when they choose their leader, they want absoluteness in that leader. This is more than impossible for a human being. You have to understand that. And I keep telling people in the part of the world that I'm from that Imran Khan is not one perfect person out there.
And this is the thing. If you have that person, then what tends to happen when someone has power is that's basically the ceiling of what you can get to.
Mm-hmm.
Like anyone who's a better general than that leader is in danger because, well, why isn't this general king?
Right.
Anytime somebody is like a wiser philosopher or a more competent governor, people start asking the question, why isn't this person? So what that means is competent people get filtered out, loyal people get filtered in.
Yep.
Whereas if you have a nation state, which isn't about one person's kingdom or dominion, then it allows everybody to kind of like do their own thing. Like, there's no inherent connection in America of, well, why isn't General Mad Dog Mathis president right now? It's just not. I mean, I'm sure there's some Marines that think that.
Yeah.
But in general, nobody. The link between war hero and president is not like a clear straight line.
I mean, it has happened in the past.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
George Washington.
I mean, Washington, Eisenhower.
Yeah.
Yeah. People with military background, he didn't become president, but John McCain was a fighter pilot and,
Yeah, and
POW and stuff like
and
that.
military service may be a great indicator of what's going to make a good leader in some ways, because it requires discipline,
Discipline.
bravery,
Yes.
Leadership principles.
yeah, leadership principles, right?
Ability to like handle large groups of people and big projects and
But it's not always going to be the general isn't always going to be the best person to be the leader.
I mean, I heard somebody, I can't remember her name, but I was watching some news commentary, and it was a couple years back, and I think we were having a Republican primary for president, so this is going back a ways. And she was talking about the guy that she wanted, and he was a nerd, and she's like, I kind of would like it if my president was a nerd. Somebody who understood numbers, right? Like somebody who understood, like, all right, he's a policy geek. Okay, we're a policy-driven country. So, I don't think we'll see a nerd president, but not anytime soon.
Well, here's the thing: different times require different people.
Right.
You need different leaders to start a company, to make a company flourish, and so you need to be able to have the flexibility to find the man of the hour.
Okay.
So if you're a dictatorship, then yes, at the beginning you will almost certainly be the man of the hour. At one point, Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein was the man of the hour, was exactly who the country needed. But just at base level as a man, you have to accept you will not always be the man of the hour. At some point, you got to step back and be like, okay, I've got to pass the mantle to others and decentralize my power and influence. In the Bible, that's King Saul's problem.
Right.
He was the man of the hour.
Mm-hmm.
His hour passed.
Right.
And there was a new man. And instead of gracefully allowing that transition,
Sure,
he held on to his own position at the expense of his soul, his life, and his country.
Right. Right.
And the correlation, I mean, it's like you gave the example of Bible. I think there is an example from Islamic history when Umayyads killed Hussein's family or Muhammad's family descendants. The next person to step in after Yazid was his son, and he stepped out. He left his kingship, or the place, a king that says, my throne is full of blood of these innocent people, so I cannot sit on. Right? So there are examples of people who did so, but I think in majority of the curve that is embedded in human nature, that we love power. We want to stay in power for some reason.
Yes, yeah, because and the reason for that is all of us have this voice in our head being like, hey, what if you were God? What if you controlled everything? What if you were the center of the universe? All of us have that. And that's the constant temptation we're being pulled towards. And the more you have money or power, the louder that voice gets, because the more that feels like reality.
Yeah, I think one other variable to say to your point is that maybe a lot of people don't think about being God, but they do think about the initial process is starting a change. If I am in control, I can change many things.
Yes.
For example, I want to be president of the whole world to fix a lot of world's problem.
Yes.
Right? But am I competent enough? Yes, I'll be able to fix some of the Pakistan's problem and maybe Saudi Arabia's problem, maybe United States problems. But what about problems in South Africa? What about the problems of Yemen? I'll be super incompetent in those. So that's where, if I do not understand those things, that's where the problem is.
That's
Yes.
when I say you start thinking you're God, I'm not saying like people actually, most of the time they don't actually think they're a living God. What I'm saying is exactly that. They think that they see more and know more and have more power than they actually have.
Right.
And so this is and this isn't just a problem in Muslim countries. This was a problem with the British Empire too. In some places in the world, the British Empire did a good job, but the fact is it's just too big. You cannot from London effectively govern New Zealand, Australia, India, Bangladesh. You're going to mess it up because you just can't pay attention to that many things. Even if you have the best intentions of treating everyone well, you're going to mess it up because you're not a god, you can't see everything, you can't do everything, and you have to prioritize things, and inevitably people far away will get deprioritized. Therefore, they should have leaders that care about, that see them, that are aware of their specific problems and have the power to actually do something about them.
Yeah, the people who are among them, people who suffer, like if there is a suffering, for example, the Great Famine back in, like you talked about, British time, right? I'm not doubting the intentions of whether at that time the president, Prime Minister
Churchill.
intention was deliberately starve the people of Bangladesh, but it happened, right? So if the leader was from Bangladesh, it would suffer that. So that makes a leader who understands the need of the people. That's why the idea of Khilafah doesn't work, because a person sitting in Turkey do not know what's happening in Bangladesh or does not know what's happening in Somalia. So that's why a nation state is.
I think what can happen, particularly, like the idea of nation states in the Bible are totally ordained, right? Like, you can go all the way back into the Torah, and there's this idea of, this is the land I apportion for you, Israel. This is the land I apportion for all the other nations. And then, like you said, Daniel talks about it, and even Jesus talks about the nations, right? Like Jesus talks about the nations, and like how, and the Bible talks about how he will come back and rule all the nations because he's God, right? But in the modern sense, like, you want to have a good, strong leader, right? You want to have good, strong leadership, but that doesn't necessarily mean you want to have authoritarian leadership, right?
Mhm.
And I think the thing that can happen is everything in a healthy nation state can move forward, but in an unhealthy nation state, it just turns into the Spider-Man meme. And everyone's just pointing at each other like, no, it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault.
Exactly.
And I think in what you're talking about, right? If there were failures on the ground level in Bangladesh, then they point at Churchill, right? And Churchill points at them. And then, throughout history, everyone points at each other and says, well, it's that guy's fault. As a Christian, I believe that the buck stops with God, right? Like, we are a fallen people. Bad things happen in a fallen world. And, if there's a famine somewhere, as a Christian, we respond out of a Christian heart, right? We should try and stop that thing from ever happening, or we should look at the needs of the people there and try and, elevate their needs over the will of the empire or whatever. But yeah, if you want to see a documentary, a 2-season documentary on like how authoritarian governments can rise to power very quickly and sort of dominate, you should watch Andor seasons 1 and 2.
So the book of Acts also says it this way. Acts 17:26 says, "And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place."
Right.
So nations are a gift from God, but they're not an eternal thing.
Right.
The idea is that God fixed the borders and time to different countries exist.
Right. But Isaiah, nations and kings will rise and fall, but the word of the Lord is spoken.
Right. So in general, as Christians, we can take whatever nation we're in as a gift from God. Not an eternal thing, not something that is inherently going to last forever, but that we should appreciate what we're in. And this is probably the best way for us to be able to organize ourselves, not by building empires,
right,
but by living in the nations we're in and seeking the good of other nations as well. So as we think about these things as Christians, the Bible doesn't give us an exact answer on whether or not there should be a Somaliland or not. But what we see throughout history is that empires can do a lot of good in the world, but they can also crush people as well. No state is perfect, no government is perfect, but the biblical principle we see is that leaders should be connected to the people that they're leading, that people should be content with the boundaries of the countries that God has given them. And we as Christians should not be advocating for empires, but we should be thankful for the boundaries of the nation we have. And we should be there to be a blessing to all the nations of the world, as Genesis said Abraham would be. The plan of God is to destroy the kingdoms of the world and bless the nations of the world. So every time we can be advocating for the flourishing of people and the decentralization of power, I think we should be. Thank you for listening to Christ and Caliphate. We'll be here next week.